The blood on Rebecca Palmer's hands had long since dried, but she could still feel its phantom warmth as she stood at the edge of Caldwell, Kansas, watching the sun rise over the prairie in the summer of 1878. She had buried her third husband just 2 weeks ago, and the townspeople whispered that she was cursed, that any man who loved her was destined to leave this world too soon. Rebecca knew the truth was simpler and far more painful. Everyone she had ever loved had abandoned her, whether by death, by choice, or by cruel circumstance, and she had learned to expect nothing else from this harsh world. She pressed her fingers against the rough wooden post of the general store, feeling the splinters catch against her calloused skin. The morning air carried the scent of cattle and dust, mixing with the smoke from breakfast fires throughout the small frontier town. Rebecca was 24 years old, though she felt ancient in her bones, worn down by loss like a stone smoothed by an endless river. Her dark auburn hair hung in a simple braid down her back, and her green eyes held shadows that no young woman should carry. "You planning on standing there all day, Rebecca?" Martha Collins called from across the dirt street, her voice sharp with judgment. "Some of us have work to do." Rebecca turned away without responding. She knew what Martha thought, what they all thought, that she was bad luck, that she should leave Caldwell before she brought more misfortune to their community. Her first husband had died of cholera within 6 months of their marriage when she was 18. Her second had been thrown from a horse and broke his neck. And Thomas, her third husband, had simply stopped breathing in his sleep, his heart giving out at 43 years old. 3 years, 3 husbands, 3 graves in the cemetery on the hill. She made her way down the main street, past the saloon that was already serving drinks despite the early hour, past the blacksmith shop where the ring of hammer on anvil had begun its daily rhythm. Her small house sat at the edge of town, a 2-room structure that Thomas had built with his own hands. She would have to leave it soon. She had no claim to it now, not really, and Thomas's brother had already sent word that he would be arriving to settle the estate. Rebecca pushed open the door and found herself staring at the sparse furnishings, the cold fireplace, the empty rocking chair where Thomas used to sit. She had cared for him in her way, though she had never loved him the way a wife should love a husband. He had been kind to her when she was desperate and alone after her second husband died. He had offered stability, safety, a roof over her head. And now he was gone too, and she was alone again, just as she always ended up. She began to pack her few belongings into a worn carpetbag. She would head west, maybe try her luck in Colorado or Montana. Somewhere no one knew her story, where she could start fresh without the weight of whispers following her everywhere. She was folding her 2 spare dresses when she heard the knock at the door. Mrs. Palmer. A young man stood on her doorstep, his face flushed from riding. "I have a message for you, from a Mr. Grant Xavier up in the mountains near Pikes Peak. He says he knew your father, James Palmer, back before you were born." Rebecca's heart stuttered. Her father had died when she was 2 years old, trampled by a stampede while working cattle. She had no memories of him, only the stories her mother used to tell before she too had passed, leaving Rebecca an orphan at 12. "What does this man want?" she asked, taking the sealed envelope from the messenger's hand. "He didn't say, madam, just asked me to deliver this to you, said it was important." Rebecca waited until the young man had left before she broke the seal. The handwriting was rough but legible, the words simple and direct. "Mrs. Palmer, I knew your father James when we worked together in the Colorado Territory back in '69. He saved my life once, and I owe him a debt I can never repay. I heard about your recent troubles and your situation in Caldwell. I have a cabin in the mountains west of Colorado Springs and land that needs tending. If you need a place to go, you are welcome here. No expectations, no obligations. Just a safe place to land. If you decide to come, head to Colorado Springs and ask for directions to Xavier's Ridge. Everyone in those parts knows where to find me. Grant Xavier. Rebecca read the letter 3 times, searching for the trap, the hidden cost, the inevitable disappointment. But the words remained the same, offering something she had long since stopped believing in. A genuine kindness without strings attached. She knew it was probably foolish to trust a stranger, to travel hundreds of miles based on a letter from a man who claimed to have known her father. But what did she have to lose? She was leaving Caldwell anyway, and at least this gave her a destination. She finished packing, sold what few items she could not carry, and used the money to buy passage on a wagon train heading west toward Colorado. The journey took 3 weeks, 3 weeks of rattling over rough terrain, sleeping under canvas, eating beans and hardtack, and listening to the other travelers share their dreams of fresh starts and new opportunities. Rebecca kept to herself mostly, not wanting to form connections that would only lead to more loss. Colorado Springs was larger than Caldwell, busier, filled with miners and merchants and families drawn by the promise of silver and gold in the nearby mountains. Rebecca asked at the general store about Xavier's Ridge, and the clerk's face broke into a smile. "You looking for Grant Xavier? Big fellow, lives up in the high country. Good man, keeps to himself mostly. Head north out of town on the trail toward Manitou Springs, then follow the creek up into the hills. You will see a split pine tree about 10 miles up. Take the left fork there and keep going until you reach his cabin. You cannot miss it. Is he a reliable man?" Rebecca asked, needing some reassurance before she ventured into the wilderness to meet a stranger. "As reliable as they come," the clerk said. "He brings furs and game down to trade every few months. Always fair, always honest. Helped rescue some folks trapped in a blizzard last winter. Like I said, good man." Rebecca rented a horse and a mule to carry her belongings and set out the next morning. The trail climbed steadily into the foothills, and the air grew cooler and thinner as she ascended. Ponderosa pines replaced the scrub oak of the lower elevations, and the sound of the creek rushing over stones accompanied her journey. She found the split pine tree just as the clerk had described, its trunk twisted and scarred by lightning, and took the left fork onto a narrower path that wound between massive boulders and stands of aspen. The cabin appeared suddenly as she rounded a bend, a solid structure built of whole logs with a stone chimney rising from the center. A large corral held several horses, and neat stacks of split firewood lined one wall. Smoke rose from the chimney, indicating someone was home. Rebecca's heart began to pound as she dismounted, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was, how isolated this place was, how little she actually knew about Grant Xavier. Before she could decide whether to approach or flee, the cabin door opened, and a man stepped out onto the porch. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Grant Xavier was the largest man she had ever seen, standing well over 6 feet tall with shoulders so broad they seemed to fill the doorway. His arms, visible beneath the rolled sleeves of his shirt, were thick with muscle, his hands large and capable. Dark brown hair fell to his shoulders, and a beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, a striking gray-blue that seemed to see right through her defenses, yet held a gentleness that contradicted his intimidating size. Rebecca Palmer. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together, yet not unkind. "Yes," she managed, her voice embarrassingly small. "You are Grant Xavier?" "I am." He descended the steps slowly, as if aware that his size might frighten her. "I am glad you made it safely." The trail can be tricky if you do not know it. Your letter said you knew my father. Grant nodded, stopping a respectful distance away. I did. Back in '69, I was trapping beaver up near Leadville. Got caught in an early snowstorm, twisted my ankle badly. Your father found me half frozen, carried me back to his camp, and tended to me for 3 days until I could walk again. He probably saved my life. Why did you write to me? Rebecca asked, her hands gripping the horse's reins tightly. How did you even know about my situation? I travel through Caldwell sometimes, trading furs. I heard people talking about James Palmer's daughter and her troubles. I recognized the name, asked some questions, and learned where to find you. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking almost embarrassed. I know what it is like to lose people, to feel like the world is against you, and I owed your father a debt. Seemed right to offer his daughter help if she needed it. Rebecca studied him, searching for deception, for ulterior motives, for the inevitable disappointment that always came. But his face remained open, honest, patient under her scrutiny. What exactly are you offering? She asked carefully. A place to stay for as long as you need it. I built a smaller cabin about 100 yards from this one last year. Was planning to use it for storage, but it is sound and weatherproof. You can live there, figure out what you want to do next. In exchange, if you are willing, I could use help with some of the daily work around here. Tending the garden, preserving food for winter, mending clothes. Things I am not particularly good at. He gestured toward his worn shirt, which was missing 2 buttons and had a poorly repaired tear in one sleeve. But there is no pressure. You are welcome here regardless. I need to be clear about something, Rebecca said, forcing herself to meet his eyes. I have been married 3 times and all 3 of my husbands died. People say I am cursed, that I bring death to anyone who gets close to me. If you have heard the stories and still want me here, then I will accept your offer. But I will not be responsible for what might happen. Grant was quiet for a long moment, then he said, My father died when I was 8, killed by a grizzly bear. My mother followed 6 months later from pneumonia. My younger sister got cholera and died when she was 16. I have lost friends to accidents, to violence, to sickness. Death is part of living on the frontier, Rebecca. You are not cursed. You have just had terrible luck, and I am sorry for your losses, but I am not afraid. Tears burned in Rebecca's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She could not remember the last time someone had spoken to her with such straightforward compassion, without judgment or fear. Show me the cabin, she said quietly. Grant led her around a stand of pine trees to a smaller structure, well built with a good roof and a small fireplace. Inside, it was one room with a bed frame, a table and chair, and hooks on the wall for hanging clothes. Simple but clean and dry. I will help you get settled, Grant said. I have extra blankets, dishes, whatever you need. Tomorrow I can show you around the property where the garden is, the spring for water, the smokehouse. Why are you doing this? Rebecca asked, the question bursting out of her before she could stop it. You do not know me. You owe my father a debt, but surely letting me stay here is more than repaying it. What do you really want? Grant leaned against the door frame, his expression thoughtful. Honestly, I am tired of being alone. Not lonely exactly, but tired of the silence, of having no one to share things with. I like my solitude, do not get me wrong. I like the mountains, the quiet, the simple life. But sometimes it would be nice to have a conversation over dinner, to hear another person's thoughts, to know someone else is nearby. I am not looking for a wife or a romance. I am just offering friendship, company, a mutually beneficial arrangement. You need a safe place, and I could use some help and companionship. Nothing more complicated than that. Rebecca wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this could be as simple as he made it sound. but she had learned that nothing was ever simple, that every promise came with hidden costs. "I will stay for a few weeks," she said finally, "and we will see how it goes." "Fair enough," Grant agreed. "Let me help you unload your things." Over the next few days, Rebecca settled into a routine at Xavier's Ridge. She woke with the sun, started a fire in her cabin's small fireplace, and made simple breakfast of porridge or eggs from the chickens Grant kept in a coop behind his cabin. Then she would work in the large garden, weeding and watering and harvesting whatever was ready. The work was familiar and soothing, her hands in the soil, the sun warm on her back, the mountain air clean and fresh in her lungs. Grant was often gone during the day, checking his trap lines or hunting or tending to the horses. But he always returned by evening, and they would share dinner, taking turns cooking or working together to prepare the meal. He was an easy companion, not demanding conversation but welcoming it when it came. He told her about the mountains, about the animals he encountered, about the changing seasons and what to expect as summer turned to fall. Rebecca found herself relaxing in small increments, the constant tension she had carried for years beginning to ease. Grant never pushed her for information about her past, never asked probing questions, never made her feel like she owed him anything beyond the simple tasks she performed to help around the homestead. He was exactly what he claimed to be, a straightforward, honest man offering uncomplicated kindness. One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, they were sitting on the porch of Grant's cabin watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Rebecca had been thinking about the pattern of her life, about the losses she had endured, and she found herself speaking without planning to. "My mother used to tell me that my father was the best man she ever knew," Rebecca said quietly. "She said he was strong and kind and brave. She said he loved us more than anything. But he died anyway, and she never recovered from losing him. She went through the motions of living, but her heart was buried with him. When she died, I think it was almost a relief for her." Grant listened without interrupting, his eyes on the distant mountains. "I was 12 when she passed," Rebecca continued. "I went to live with my aunt in Missouri. She was not a cruel woman, but she was not particularly kind either. I was a burden, another mouth to feed. When I turned 18, she arranged for me to marry Henry Mitchell. He was 35, a widower with no children. I barely knew him, but I did not have any other options. And then he died 6 months later, and I was alone again." "Your second husband?" Grant asked gently. "Robert Fisher." "I was 19. He was 26, a ranch hand who courted me for 3 months before proposing. I thought maybe I could build something with him, a real life. But then the accident happened and he was gone. And then Thomas, my third husband. He was a good man, but I married him because I was desperate, not because I loved him. And now he is dead too, and people look at me like I am poison." "You are not poison," Grant said firmly. "You are a woman who has endured more loss than anyone should have to bear. But you are still here, still surviving, still trying. That takes strength, Rebecca. Do not let anyone make you feel otherwise." Rebecca felt tears spill down her cheeks, and she quickly wiped them away, embarrassed by the show of emotion. But Grant did not look uncomfortable or dismissive. He simply handed her his handkerchief and waited, patient and steady as the mountains around them. "I am afraid," Rebecca admitted, her voice breaking. "I am afraid to care about anyone or anything because I know it will be taken away. I am afraid to hope because hope has only ever led to heartbreak. And I am afraid that if I let myself feel safe here, it will all fall apart like everything else has." Grant was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life is unpredictable and we are all going to die eventually. But I can promise you this. I will not abandon you. As long as you want to stay here, you have a home. I will not leave, I will not disappear, and I will not ask you for more than you are willing to give. You are safe here, Rebecca. And that is a promise I intend to keep." Something in Rebecca's chest cracked open at his words, a fierce longing for them to be true warring with the deep-seated fear that had protected her for so long. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this mountain man with his gentle eyes and steadfast manner could be the one person who would not leave her behind. "Why would you make such a promise?" she whispered. "Because I understand what it is like to be alone," Grant said simply. "And because I believe everyone deserves at least one person who will stay." The summer weeks passed, flowing into early autumn. The aspen trees turned gold and the air grew crisp at night. Rebecca found herself spending more time with Grant, not just during meals but throughout the day. She would accompany him to check the trap lines, learning how to read the signs of animal activity, how to safely release a trap, how to prepare the pelts. He taught her to shoot his rifle, patiently correcting her stance and aim until she could hit a target with reasonable accuracy. In turn, Rebecca brought order to Grant's homestead. She organized his cabin, mended all his clothes, and began preserving food for the winter. She made jams from wild berries, dried strips of venison, and pickled vegetables from the garden. She found herself humming while she worked, a lightness creeping into her days that she had not felt in years. Grant's presence became a constant comfort. He was solid and reliable, always doing exactly what he said he would do, always returning when he said he would return. If he told her he would be back by sundown, he was there as the last light faded from the sky. If he promised to fix something, it was repaired by the next day. Slowly, carefully, Rebecca began to trust that he meant what he said, that his promise to stay was not just empty words. One afternoon in late September, Rebecca was in the garden harvesting the last of the squash when she heard horses approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw 3 riders coming up the trail toward the cabin. Grant was inside working on a new trap, and she quickly made her way toward the cabin to alert him. The riders were rough-looking men, armed and wearing the trail-worn clothes of drifters. The one in front had a scar running down his left cheek and cold eyes that made Rebecca's skin crawl. Grant emerged from the cabin before she reached it, his rifle held casually but ready. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he called out, his voice neutral but firm. "Heard you got yourself a woman up here," the scarred man said, his eyes raking over Rebecca in a way that made her want to hide. "Pretty thing like that must get lonely in these mountains. Maybe she would like some company." "The lady is not interested," Grant said, moving to position himself between Rebecca and the riders. "I suggest you move along." "Now that is not very hospitable," another rider said, grinning to show missing teeth. "We just want to be friendly." "I am going to say this one time," Grant said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. "Turn your horses around and leave. Now." The scarred man's hand moved toward his gun, and Rebecca's heart stopped. But Grant was faster, raising his rifle and cocking it in one smooth motion. The sound echoed across the clearing, sharp and unmistakable. "I can drop all 3 of you before you clear leather," Grant said calmly. "And I am a very good shot, your choice." For a tense moment nobody moved. Then the 3rd rider, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Come on, Jake, he is not worth it. Let us go." The scarred man glared at Grant, then at Rebecca, but finally yanked his horse's head around. "This is not over," he muttered. "It is," Grant said flatly. "And if I see you on my land again, I will not be so polite." The 3 men rode off, and Grant kept his rifle raised until they disappeared around the bend in the trail. Only then did he lower the weapon and turn to Rebecca. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes searching her face. Rebecca nodded, though she was trembling. "Thank you, I was afraid they would." "They are gone," Grant said gently, "and they will not be back. Men like that are cowards at heart. They prey on people they think are weak or vulnerable. But you are not alone here, Rebecca. I meant what I said. I will not let anyone hurt you." "You would have shot them," Rebecca said, not quite a question. "Yes," Grant said without hesitation. "If they had drawn their weapons, if they had threatened you, I would have done whatever was necessary to protect you. You are under my care now, and I take that seriously." The fierce protectiveness in his voice sent a shiver through Rebecca that had nothing to do with fear. She realized in that moment that her feelings for Grant had evolved beyond gratitude or friendship. She admired his strength, yes, but also his gentleness. She appreciated his steady presence, but also the way he made her laugh with his dry observations about the world. She valued his protection, but also the way he treated her as an equal, someone whose thoughts and opinions mattered. She was falling in love with him, and the realization terrified her. That night, Rebecca could not sleep. She lay in her small cabin, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Loving Grant would be a mistake. Everyone she loved died or left. She should pack her things and leave before she became too attached, before she dragged him down into the curse that seemed to follow her. But even as she thought it, she knew she would not go. She had nowhere else to be, and the thought of leaving this place, leaving Grant, filled her with a pain so acute it took her breath away. She was trapped between her fear of loss and her growing need to stay, and she did not know which would win. The next morning, Grant announced that he needed to go into Colorado Springs to trade furs and purchase supplies for the winter. "It will take me 3 days there and back," he said over breakfast. "Will you be all right here alone?" Every instinct in Rebecca screamed that this was it, that he was leaving and would not return, that his promise had been just another lie. But she forced herself to nod. "I will be fine. Be careful on the trail." "I will," Grant said. He hesitated, then added, "Rebecca, I am coming back." "You know that, right?" She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe him, but the words stuck in her throat. Grant seemed to understand. He crossed to where she sat and knelt down so they were at eye level. "I am coming back," he said again. His gray-blue eyes locked on hers. "In 3 days I will ride back up this trail and I will be here. I have never broken a promise to you, and I am not going to start now. Do you understand?" "I want to believe you," Rebecca whispered. "Then try," Grant said gently. "Just try. I will prove it to you." He left an hour later, his horse loaded with furs, and Rebecca watched him disappear down the trail with a hollow feeling in her chest. She threw herself into work, cleaning both cabins thoroughly, reorganizing the smokehouse, chopping firewood until her arms ached. Anything to keep her mind occupied, to keep the fear at bay. The first day passed slowly. The second day crawled by. By the third day, Rebecca was pacing the clearing, her eyes constantly drawn to the trail, her stomach in knots. What if he had an accident? What if those men from before found him on the road? What if he decided that dealing with her fears and her baggage was not worth the trouble and simply did not return? The sun was setting when she finally heard the sound of a horse. Rebecca's heart leaped into her throat as she ran toward the trail, and then Grant appeared, riding steady and strong, exactly as he had promised. Relief flooded through her so powerfully that her knees went weak. Grant dismounted quickly when he saw her face. "Rebecca, what is wrong?" "Nothing," she said, wiping at her eyes. "You came back." "Of course I came back," Grant said, looking genuinely confused. "I told you I would." "I know, I had trouble believing it." Understanding dawned in Grant's eyes. He dropped his horse's reins and closed the distance between them, his large hands gently gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. I know you have been hurt, I know you have been abandoned, and I know you are afraid, but I am not going anywhere. I made you a promise, Rebecca, and I will keep it. Every time I leave, I will come back. Every time you need me, I will be here. I am staying. Do you hear me? I am staying." Rebecca looked up at him, at this mountain man who had shown her more kindness and steadiness in a few months than she had known in years, and something inside her finally broke free from the prison of fear. "I believe you," she said, and meant it. Grant smiled, a rare, genuine smile that transformed his rugged face. "Good. Now help me unpack. I brought you something from town." He had bought her a new dress, a simple but well-made garment in a deep blue that matched her eyes. He had also brought sugar, coffee, and a small book of poetry. Rebecca held the gifts, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of them, by the fact that he had been thinking of her while he was away. "Thank you," she said softly. "You did not have to do this." "I wanted to," Grant said simply. That night, as they prepared dinner together, Rebecca found herself studying Grant when he was not looking. The way his hands moved with practiced efficiency as he cut vegetables. The way his hair fell forward when he bent over the pot. The way his presence filled the cabin, solid and reassuring. She wanted to tell him how she felt, but the words seemed too big, too dangerous to speak aloud. October brought the first snow, light dustings that melted by midday but signaled the coming winter. Grant began teaching Rebecca the skills she would need to survive the mountain cold. How to bank a fire to last through the night, how to recognize the signs of frostbite, how to layer clothes for maximum warmth. He was a patient teacher, never making her feel foolish for not knowing things that were second nature to him. One evening, they were sitting by the fire in Grant's cabin after a day of cutting and stacking firewood. Rebecca was mending a tear in one of Grant's shirts, and he was working on a new trap, the comfortable silence between them punctuated by the crackle of the flames. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said, setting down her sewing. "Of course. Why have you never married? A man like you with land and skills and, well, you are not hard to look at. Surely you have had opportunities." Grant's hand stilled on the trap. "I was engaged once," he said quietly. "Her name was Sarah. This was about 8 years ago before I moved to the mountains. She was beautiful and kind, and I thought we would have a good life together. But then she met someone else, someone with more money and better prospects. She broke off the engagement and married him within 3 months. "I am sorry," Rebecca said, her heart aching for him. "It was a long time ago," Grant said, resuming his work on the trap. "But it taught me that I am not cut out for that kind of life. The social expectations, the need to impress, the constant worry about being enough. I am happier here in the mountains, living simply. I gave up on the idea of marriage after that." "Do you regret it?" Rebecca asked. "Choosing this life," Grant looked up at her, his gray-blue eyes serious. "I did not until recently. Now I find myself thinking about what it would be like to have a partner, someone to share this life with. Someone who understands the appeal of simplicity and solitude but also values companionship, someone like—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Never mind." "Someone like what?" Rebecca pressed, her heart beginning to pound. Grant set down the trap and looked at her directly. "Someone like you, Rebecca. You fit here in these mountains, in this life. You understand the value of hard work and simple pleasures. You do not need constant entertainment or social events. You are content with quiet evenings and good conversation. And you are stronger than you give yourself credit for. You have survived losses that would have broken most people, and you are still here, still trying, still hoping despite your fears. I admire that. I admire you." Rebecca could not breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such genuine respect and admiration. "Grant, You do not have to say anything," Grant said quickly. "I am not asking for anything, not expecting anything. I just wanted you to know how I feel, but nothing has to change." We can continue exactly as we have been. What if I do not want things to stay the same? Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Grant went very still. What do you mean? Rebecca set down her sewing and stood up, crossing to where Grant sat. She was shaking, but she forced herself to speak. I am falling in love with you, Grant Xavier. It terrifies me because everyone I love leaves or dies, and I cannot bear the thought of losing you too. But I am tired of letting fear control my life. You have shown me what it means to trust someone, to rely on someone. You have kept every promise you have made to me. You stayed when you said you would stay, and I want more than friendship. If you do. Grant rose to his feet slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. Rebecca, I have been half in love with you since the day you arrived. I did not say anything because I did not want to pressure you, did not want to make you feel obligated. But if you are saying what I think you are saying, I am saying I want to try, Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. I want to see if we can build something together. I want to stop running from my fear and start running toward something good, toward you. Grant reached out and cupped her face in his large hands, his touch infinitely gentle. I will not leave you, Rebecca. I will not die on you if I can help it, and I will fight like hell to stay alive because I have something to live for now. I will not break your heart if I can prevent it. And I will love you for as long as you will let me. That is my promise. I will hold you to that, Rebecca said, smiling through her tears. I hope you do, Grant said, and then he kissed her. It was a soft kiss, tentative and sweet, a question and an answer all at once. Rebecca felt the last of her walls crumble, felt herself open up to the possibility of love without the shadow of loss hanging over it. Grant's arms came around her, strong and sure, and she melted into his embrace, feeling safer than she had ever felt in her life. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard and Grant's eyes were bright with emotion. We will take this slow, he said. We will do this right. I want to court you properly, Rebecca. I want to give you time to be sure. I am already sure, Rebecca said, but she understood what he meant. They needed to build this relationship on a solid foundation, not rush into something because of loneliness or need. Over the next few weeks, Grant courted Rebecca with a focused determination that was both endearing and overwhelming. He carved small gifts for her, pieces of wood shaped into birds and flowers. He took her on long walks through the mountains, showing her the places he loved, the hidden valleys and crystal-clear streams. He read to her from the book of poetry he had bought in Colorado Springs, his deep voice stumbling over the more flowery passages in a way that made her laugh. They held hands while walking, stole kisses when the mood struck, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. Rebecca learned that Grant had traveled extensively before settling in the mountains, that he had tried his hand at mining and ranching and various other professions before finding his place as a trapper. Grant learned that Rebecca had a gift for drawing, that she had once dreamed of being a teacher, that she loved thunderstorms and hated the taste of coffee but drank it anyway because it reminded her of her mother. The physical attraction between them grew stronger every day. Rebecca found herself noticing the way Grant's muscles flexed when he swung an axe, the way his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders, the way his hands looked against her smaller ones. Grant made no secret of his admiration for Rebecca, his eyes following her movements, his hand lingering on the small of her back when they walked side by side. But Grant was true to his word about taking things slow. He kissed her often, sweet kisses that sometimes deepened into something more heated, but he always pulled back before things went too far. I respect you, he would say, his voice rough with restraint, and I want to do this properly. Rebecca appreciated his respect, But as the weeks turned into months and winter settled over the mountains in earnest, she found herself wanting more. She wanted to belong to Grant completely, wanted to bind herself to him in every way possible. She had been married 3 times, but she had never felt the kind of desire she felt for Grant. He made her feel alive, made her feel beautiful and wanted and cherished. One night in late November, after a particularly intense kissing session that left them both flushed and breathing hard, Rebecca pulled back and looked Grant in the eyes. "Marry me," she said. Grant blinked. "What? Marry me?" Rebecca repeated. "I know it is fast, but we have been living and working together for months now. We know each other better than most couples do before they marry. I love you, Grant. I want to be your wife, and I do not want to wait any more." "Rebecca, are you sure?" Grant asked, his hands gripping her waist. "I do not want you to feel rushed, and I know your history with marriage has been complicated." "I am sure," Rebecca said firmly. "My previous marriages were born out of necessity or desperation. This is different. This is choice. I am choosing you, Grant Xavier. I am choosing this life, this love, this future. Will you have me?" Grant's face broke into that rare, transforming smile. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes, I will marry you. I will be honored to marry you." They rode down to Colorado Springs the next week, and were married by a justice of the peace in a simple ceremony, with 2 witnesses pulled in from the street. Rebecca wore the blue dress Grant had bought her, and Grant wore his cleanest shirt and looked impossibly nervous for a man who faced down bears and mountain lions without flinching. When the justice pronounced them husband and wife, Grant kissed Rebecca with such tenderness that both witnesses sighed. They spent their wedding night in a hotel in Colorado Springs, the first time Rebecca had slept in a real bed in months. Grant was gentle with her, taking his time, making sure she felt loved and cherished. It was nothing like her previous experiences with intimacy, which had been awkward or perfunctory. With Grant, it was a conversation, a dance, a joining of bodies and hearts that left Rebecca feeling complete in a way she had never imagined possible. "I love you," Grant whispered against her hair as they lay tangled together afterwards. "I will love you until the day I die, and if there is anything beyond that, I will love you there too." "Do not talk about dying," Rebecca said, pressing her face against his chest. "Not tonight." "All right," Grant agreed, holding her closer. "Tonight we celebrate life, our life together." They returned to the mountain homestead as husband and wife, and Rebecca moved her belongings into Grant's cabin. The larger cabin became their home, warm and welcoming with the touches Rebecca added. She made curtains for the windows, arranged wildflowers in a chipped vase, and hung her drawings on the walls. Grant built her a larger work table for her sewing and carved her name next to his on the beam above the door. Winter in the mountains was harsh but beautiful. Snow piled high around the cabin, and the temperature dropped well below freezing most nights. But inside, they were warm and safe, wrapped in furs and each other's arms. They read together by firelight, cooked elaborate meals to pass the time, and made love with an enthusiasm that never seemed to diminish. Rebecca had never been so happy. Every morning she woke up beside Grant, and every morning she marveled that he was still there, solid and real and hers. The fear that had haunted her for so long began to fade, replaced by a cautious optimism that maybe, just maybe, this happiness would last. Spring came late to the mountains, but when it arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted into rushing streams, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and the world felt reborn. Rebecca discovered she was pregnant in early May, and the joy on Grant's face when she told him made her cry. "We are going to have a baby," Grant kept repeating, as if he could not quite believe it. "Rebecca, we are going to have a family." "Are you happy?" Rebecca asked, suddenly nervous. They had not discussed children, had not planned for this. Happy, Grant pulled her into his arms. I am beyond happy. I am ecstatic. You have given me everything I never knew I wanted. A wife, a home, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive. The pregnancy was difficult at times. Rebecca suffered from morning sickness for the first few months, and the summer heat made her uncomfortable and tired. But Grant was attentive and patient, taking over more of the physical work, making sure she rested, bringing her cool water from the spring when she felt overheated. He talked to her belly at night, telling their unborn child stories about the mountains and the animals and the life they would have together. You are going to be such a good father, Rebecca said one night, watching him rest his head on her swollen stomach. I am going to try, Grant said seriously. I am going to make sure our child knows they are loved, that they are wanted, that they have a father who will never abandon them. Rebecca heard the echo of her own fears in his words and realized that Grant understood her on a level few people ever could. They were both survivors of loss, both cautious with their hearts, both determined to build something better for their child. Their son was born in late December during a snowstorm that trapped them in the cabin for 3 days. The labor was long and frightening, but Grant stayed by Rebecca's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, a squalling, red-faced boy with dark hair and his father's gray-blue eyes, Grant wept openly. He is perfect, Grant said, cradling the tiny baby with his large hands. Rebecca, he is absolutely perfect. They named him James, after Rebecca's father, and settled into the exhausting rhythm of new parenthood. Rebecca was amazed by how naturally Grant took to fatherhood. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with James when he cried, and sang off-key lullabies that somehow always worked. He was patient with Rebecca's tearful moments, understanding with her exhaustion and supportive in every way. As James grew from infant to toddler, Rebecca's old fears tried to resurface. What if something happened to him? What if she lost this precious child like she had lost everyone else she loved? But Grant seemed to sense her spiraling thoughts and would always pull her back. We cannot live in fear of what might happen, he would tell her gently. We can only love each other today, right now, and trust that we are doing our best. James is healthy and strong. You are a wonderful mother. I am here, and I am not going anywhere. Focus on what we have, not what we might lose. It became a mantra between them, a way of anchoring themselves in the present rather than drowning in fear of the future. And slowly, Rebecca learned to let go of the constant anxiety, to embrace the joy of watching her son grow, of building a life with a man who loved her unconditionally. When James was 2 years old, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she felt more confident, more prepared. The pregnancy was easier, and their daughter was born on a warm summer evening with much less drama than her brother's arrival. They named her Grace, and she had her mother's auburn hair and green eyes. Grant adored both his children with a fierce, protective love that still left room for tenderness. He taught James to ride when the boy was barely 4, holding him steady in the saddle and leading the horse in slow circles around the clearing. He carried Grace on his shoulders through the mountain trails, pointing out birds and flowers and teaching her the names of everything they saw. Rebecca would watch them together, her heart full to bursting, and think about how far she had come. From the frightened, grieving woman who had arrived at Xavier's Ridge 6 years ago to this version of herself, confident, loved, and complete. Grant had kept his promise. He had stayed. Through harsh winters and difficult pregnancies, through the everyday challenges of building a life in the wilderness, through moments of doubt and fear, he had been there. steady, strong, and unwavering in his commitment to her and their family. As the years passed, the homestead grew and prospered. Grant expanded the cabin, adding 2 more rooms for the growing family. Rebecca planted flower gardens and taught Grace how to tend them. James learned to trap and hunt with his father, showing the same quiet competence that Grant displayed. They made trips to Colorado Springs a few times a year, selling furs and buying supplies, but always returned to the mountains with relief, glad to be back in the place they called home. When James was 10 and Grace was 8, Rebecca found herself pregnant once more, a surprise but a welcome one. This pregnancy brought complications, and there were moments when Rebecca feared she would not survive. But Grant was there, holding her through the pain, praying with an intensity she had never seen from him, refusing to accept any outcome but her survival. Their second daughter, Hope, was born small but healthy, and Rebecca recovered slowly but completely. Grant had been terrified in a way Rebecca had rarely seen, and for weeks after Hope's birth, he barely let Rebecca out of his sight. "I thought I was going to lose you," he admitted one night, his voice breaking. "I thought the universe was going to take you from me, and I did not know how I would survive it." "But you did not lose me," Rebecca said, cupping his face in her hands. "I am still here. We are both still here. You stayed just like you promised, and I stayed too. We are not going anywhere, Grant." "I love you," Grant said fiercely. "I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too," Rebecca replied. "You saved me, you know. Not just by offering me a place to stay, but by showing me that not everyone leaves, that some people keep their promises, that I am worthy of being loved and of staying in one place long enough to build something real." Years continued to flow by like the creek that ran through their property, steady and constant. James grew into a young man, tall and broad-shouldered like his father, with the same quiet competence and gentle strength. He had no interest in leaving the mountains, content to help his father with the trap lines and dream of building his own cabin nearby someday. Grace was spirited and curious, always asking questions, always pushing boundaries. She wanted to see more of the world than just the mountains, and Rebecca and Grant both knew she would leave someday to explore, though they hoped she would always come back. Hope was the baby of the family, sweet-natured and artistic like her mother, spending hours drawing the world around her. Rebecca was 42 years old when she stood on the porch of their cabin one autumn evening, watching Grant and James repair the corral fence while Grace chased Hope through the falling leaves. The sun was setting over the peaks, painting everything gold and orange, and Rebecca felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She had been so afraid for so long, convinced that she was cursed, that everyone she loved would be taken from her. But Grant had proven her wrong. He had stayed through illness and health, through easy times and hard times, through every challenge and joy that life had brought them. He had kept his promise, and in doing so, had taught her that love did not have to end in loss. That commitment was not just words, but actions repeated every single day. Grant looked up from his work and saw her watching. He said something to James, then walked toward the cabin, his stride still strong and sure even though his hair was now streaked with gray. He climbed the steps and pulled Rebecca into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "How lucky I am," Rebecca said simply. "How grateful I am that you wrote that letter all those years ago. How my life would have been so different if you had not given me a place to land." "Our life," Grant corrected gently. "And I am the lucky one. You brought light and love into my solitary existence. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to look forward to each new day. I would not change a single moment of our time together." Rebecca turned in his arms to face him, studying the face she knew as well as her own. The lines around his eyes, the gray in his beard, the small scar on his forehead from where a branch had caught him during a storm 2 years ago. Every mark was a story, every feature beloved. "Promise me something," Rebecca said. "Anything," Grant replied immediately. "Promise me we will grow old together, that we will sit on this porch when we are ancient and gray and watch our grandchildren play, that we will have years and years more of this life we have built." Grant's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "I promise, Rebecca Xavier. I will stay with you until my last breath, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that last breath is many, many years from now. You are stuck with me forever." "Good," Rebecca said, smiling through her own tears. "That is exactly what I wanted to hear." They kissed as the sun set, and their children played, and the mountains stood eternal around them. It was a moment of perfect peace, the kind that only comes when you have fought through fear to find faith, when you have survived loss to discover lasting love. The years ahead would bring their share of challenges. Winters would be harsh, money would be tight at times, and there would be the normal struggles of raising children and managing a homestead in the wilderness. But Rebecca and Grant faced it all together, their bond growing stronger with each passing year, their love deepening with time rather than fading. James eventually did build his own cabin nearby and brought home a wife, a strong young woman named Sarah who fit into the family perfectly. They had 3 children of their own, and Grant proved to be every bit as devoted a grandfather as he had been a father. Grace left for Denver when she was 18, working as a teacher and sending letters home filled with stories of city life. She came back every summer, though, unable to stay away from the mountains for too long. Hope married a rancher from Colorado Springs and settled close enough to visit often, bringing her own children to explore the trails Rebecca and Grant had walked together for so many years. As Rebecca entered her 50s and then her 60s, she sometimes thought about the girl she had been when she first arrived at Xavier's Ridge. That frightened, broken young woman who had been so certain she was cursed, who could not imagine trusting anyone enough to build a life with them. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything would be all right, that the mountain man who offered her shelter would become the love of her life, that she would find healing and wholeness in the Colorado mountains. But perhaps that girl would not have believed her. Perhaps she had needed to live through every moment, every fear conquered and every promise kept, to truly understand the depth of what she and Grant had built together. Grant's hair turned completely white, and his hands developed arthritis that made trapping difficult. But he remained strong and steady, still chopping wood and tending the horses well into his 70s. Rebecca's auburn hair turned silver, and her eyes developed the wrinkles of a life spent smiling, but she remained active, tending her gardens and teaching her grandchildren to draw and sew. They did exactly what Rebecca had asked. They grew old together. They sat on the porch in the evenings watching grandchildren play, holding hands like young lovers despite their age. They told stories of the early days, of the challenges they had overcome, of the promises made and kept. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, mourned the passing of friends, and remained grateful for every day they were given. When Grant was 76 years old, he had a close call with a heart problem that sent the entire family into a panic. The doctor in Colorado Springs said he needed to take it easy, to stop the heavy physical labor. Grant grumbled about it but obeyed, not wanting to leave Rebecca after promising her a long life together. He recovered fully, and they had several more good years, adjusting their lifestyle but not their commitment to each other. Rebecca was 73 when she realized with absolute certainty that the curse she had feared for so long had never existed. It had been terrible luck and the harsh realities of frontier life, nothing more. She had not brought death to the people she loved. She had simply lived through loss until she found someone strong enough, committed enough, and loving enough to build something that lasted. One evening, sitting on their porch with Grant beside her, their grown children and grandchildren gathered for a summer celebration, Rebecca leaned her head on Grant's shoulder and sighed contentedly. "What are you thinking?" Grant asked, the same question he had asked 1,000 times over the decades. "That you were right," Rebecca said. "That day you promised you would not abandon me, you were absolutely right. You stayed, Grant. Through everything, you stayed." "Of course I did," Grant said, as if it had never been in question. "I loved you, I love you still. Why would I ever leave?" "Some people do," Rebecca said softly. "Some people break their promises." "Not me," Grant said firmly. "Never me." "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rebecca Xavier. Staying with you has been the easiest promise I ever kept." Rebecca looked around at the life they had built together, the strong cabin that had sheltered them through countless storms. The grown children who had inherited their parents' strength and love. The grandchildren who represented the future, bright and full of possibility. The mountains that had been their constant companions, beautiful and eternal. She thought about the blood on her hands all those years ago, the grief that had nearly consumed her, the fear that had held her captive for so long. And she thought about how one letter, one man, one promise had changed everything. "Thank you," Rebecca whispered. "For what?" Grant asked. "For writing that letter, for offering me a home, for seeing past my fear to the person I could be, for staying when everyone else left, for loving me when I did not know how to love myself, for giving me a family and a life beyond anything I ever dreamed possible. For everything, Grant. Thank you for everything." Grant turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. His grip was still strong despite his age, his eyes still the same gray-blue that had captivated her from the very beginning. "You do not have to thank me for loving you, Rebecca. That was never a sacrifice or a duty. It was the greatest privilege of my life." They kissed then, a soft, sweet kiss that held 40 years of history, of promises kept and challenges overcome, of love that had started tentatively but had grown into something unshakable. Around them, their family laughed and talked, the sound of happiness echoing across the mountain valley. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rebecca felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She was no longer afraid. She no longer waited for the other shoe to drop, for tragedy to strike, for the people she loved to be taken away. She had learned that while loss was a part of life, so was love. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone who meant their promises, who stayed when things got hard, who loved you not just in words but in consistent, daily action. Grant Xavier had been that person for her. Her mountain man, her husband, her partner, her love. He had promised to stay, and he had kept that promise always, through decades of life lived fully and deeply together. And in doing so, he had healed wounds Rebecca had thought were permanent, had given her a life she had stopped believing was possible, had shown her that happy endings were not just stories but something you built together, day by day, promise by promise, year by year. As Rebecca sat surrounded by family on that warm summer evening, Grant's hand secure in hers, the mountains standing eternal around them, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found her home. Not just a place, but a person. Not just a moment, but a lifetime. Not just a promise, but a love that would last as long as they both lived and beyond. The curse had never been real, but the love was, and that made all the difference.